Welcome to the Dark Mind Podcast. All right, friends and familiars. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Dark Mind Podcast, where we explore the boundless realm of dark literature and film. On today's show, I have a Bram Stoker and Shirley Jackson Award-nominated author of cosmic, creature, and quiet horror. She's joining me today to discuss her recent short story collection entitled White Trash and Recycled Nightmares. So without further ado, join me as we delve into the dark insight of Rebecca Rowland. Friends and familiars, we are live on YouTube, Twitch, and X with Rebecca Rowland talking about her recent collection of short stories entitled White Trash and Recycled Nightmares. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are quite welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me on this 15th day of September 2024. I came across your work when I had the absolute pleasure of meeting you in person at the Texas AuthorCon. I checked out your collection, White Trash and Recycled Nightmares, not knowing what to expect, and what I found was a dark, consuming, immersive blend of grief, revenge, and serial killer horror with a healthy dose of the supernatural. The story struck every level of emotion, leaving the reader bewildered as they progressed from one story to the next. I really enjoyed the psychological roller coaster, so thank you for lending me your ear, and thank you for being on the show.
Wow, that's my new ringtone, Vince. I've decided I'm just going to capture that. That was lovely. That is, I won't have imposter syndrome for quite some time now. So thank you for saying that.
You're
thank
quite
you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Anything I can do in that respect. Too many great. That's what I've noticed. Too many great writers have imposter syndrome.
It happens to all of us. It happens to all of us. But thank you. Thank you for all of your kind words. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, so the book begins with a quote from the lyrics of a Nine Inch Nails song entitled The Collector. The song's lyrics suggest the narrator is consumed by a compulsive need to collect and hold on to one's negative experiences, emotions, or even aspects of other people's lives. This, quote, collection becomes overwhelming, leading to feelings of inner turmoil and a loss of identity. How does that relate to the stories in this book and or your writing process?
Well, first of all, I wanted a Trent Reznor epigraph. So
good enough, right there.
Right. And that's it. That's my whole answer. No, I'm a huge Nine Inch Nails fan. I have every possible iteration of everything he's created. But the stories in this particular collection actually came to fruition for the most part. They're all my recycled nightmares. Literally, there were like 4 or 5 years where I was having severe insomnia. And when I did manage to get some sleep, I was having these very vivid dreams, often nightmares, but not always. And I just decided to start using that. And when I woke up, I wrote down everything I could remember from that dream. I would revisit it later and then recycle it, use it for a story. And so I think that perhaps in that time of my life, I was having some anxiety that I just was misplacing or whatever was going on. And I just kept collecting these, bits of anxiety that were coming out through my dreams, and they became these stories. So I thought that this particular song fit very well, I thought.
Yeah, and I actually looked that song up. I had not, I seem to have confined myself to Pretty Hate Machine, The Downward Spiral, and Hesitation Marks.
Yeah.
What's the name of that album that the collector?
It's With Teeth, from With Teeth.
Yeah, I never, for some reason, I never listened to that album, so I'm going to have to check that out. As I've gotten older, for some reason, my musical tastes have gone into like EDM, even though I don't dance, which is just bizarre.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still like industrial, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not a huge jump, I think, from Reznor, but yeah, Hesitation Marks, that's a fantastic album. I did there were a couple of songs on there that I wanted to grab a quote from, but yeah, the collector seemed to work. It seemed to work the best.
Yeah. So do you have like this awesome dream book that you record this stuff in, like a leather-bound tome?
I wish. No, I just used the notepad on my phone, and just so that I wasn't sort of reusing pieces. Anytime I took something, I immediately erased it. I sort of wish that I'd kept all of the notes, but and there were some that were so nonsensical. I would go back and I'd be like, I don't know what the hell I just wrote down. I don't know what this is, because I wouldn't look at it for months, till months later, and even then. Sometimes it would just be a snippet of the story as a whole. The only one that really translated into some sort of narrative was Layover. Layover is one of these it's a weird phenomena for me, because it was a story that came to me in a dream, almost in a complete form. Even the fact that there was a male protagonist, and I woke up, wrote everything down. It took me forever to write everything down. And then I started searching. I thought, oh, well, this must be like a television show that I saw, or it has to be a story that I've read. Like, why would I have this entire piece done? And I couldn't find it. And God, I really hope it doesn't exist someplace else. But it was just this gift. I have no idea. I have no idea where it came from. I don't have a fear of flying. I don't, have a small child that draws weird pictures. I do drink quite a bit, but that's really, I think, the only connection between Adam and I. But yeah, so that was sort of the genesis of most of those stories. I would say almost all but maybe one or two came from nightmares.
Okay. Well, that's a good segue into Layover. As you mentioned, male protagonist, man named Adam, has a job that requires a lot of traveling. And as you mentioned, he has, I'm not saying you have a drinking problem, but Adam definitely has a drinking problem. let me be clear that what I'm saying.
The jury's out on that one, so it's fine. It's fine.
Well, you're supposed to say I don't have a drinking problem. I've got drinking down pat.
Exactly.
Well, so Adam, though, has a drinking and a womanizing problem, and begins to receive phone calls from a woman screaming at the top of her lungs and intermittently saying cryptic things like, "You did this." So alcohol and womanizing are often linked to self-destruction, and this character spirals because of both. So how did you balance these traits in a way that made the reader feel both anger and empathy for the protagonist?
It's funny you should say that, because the first go round, when I went back and I reread it, I thought, no one cares about this guy. He is an absolute, there's nothing salvageable about this guy. And so I ended up tweaking it a little bit. I tried to put, he's pathetic. He is a pathetic individual. He is someone that is, who is fully aware that what he's doing is wrong. He knows it. He feels guilt. I have him looking at his phone. He looks at pictures of his family. he passes out at one point, and his daughter sort of wakes him up and is like, "It's bedtime, Daddy." And he's like, "Oh my God, did you take a bath without me?" Like, and then he imagines like, "Oh my God, she could have drowned in the tub. What is the matter with me? I'm a terrible parent." And and even later on is completely obliterated and is just sobbing how sorry he is to his wife Diane, never really explaining why, just saying, "So, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." So I wanted to sort of put those scenes in there to show that he's not a narcissist. He's not someone that's a sociopath. He's not he's someone that any one of us could turn into, I guess, is what I wanted to show, because he's still very human and very flawed. He's flawed on a level that most of us probably aren't, but he's not to the point of no return, except he does make a choice where he's past the point of no return. So yeah, I mean, I he's one of the few characters that I actually really like. Most of my characters I tend to not like very much, and I liked him, and I don't know what it was about him, and I think it's because he is so. When he really does have some sort of self-reflection, he realizes that what he's done is terrible. What he's doing is terrible.
Yeah, it seems like the first thing that he realizes is his drinking. Like he's noticing, this is becoming a pattern. I'm drinking every night. I got to stop this. And maybe, I guess that's kind of like the impetus that, where he does start having at least some remorse for what he's doing.
Right. I mean, I guess I think in my head, it probably isn't the first time. I think anyone who struggles with any sort of addiction, it's a repeating cycle that, oh, I shouldn't do this. I'm not going to drink anymore. Oh, the next day I'm just going to have one drink, and then it becomes 50 drinks or whatever it is. And then I'm not going to do it again. I'm not going to do it again. And I mean, I'm a former smoker. I smoked for a really long time, and I can remember trying to quit over and over and over again, and saying like, and even just like a couple of nights just smoking too much and just having that smell, and then that night thinking, I'm just never going to do it again. I'm never going to do it again. And the next day, picking up a pack of cigarettes. And it really wasn't until I just said, this is it. I am not a smoker anymore, and stopped buying packs of cigarettes, that I think it stuck for the most part. Every once in a while, I'll, be out or whatever. But I understand. I guess I understand what it is to have an addiction. And I also come from a family where there is drug addiction in my family, like most people, I think, these days. I think we all know someone, and it's so you see it. You see it. It's not something that's foreign, I think, to most people at this point, whether we're seeing it as an outsider or having experienced it ourselves.
Yeah. I actually quit smoking as well, and there was multiple attempts. But what's funny is what really got me off the cigarettes was not something honorable, like I was trying to improve my health or, anything like that. It was just, They were getting so expensive.
Yeah.
You couldn't even smoke in bars anymore, at least where I was. And they were so expensive that everybody stopped buying them and started bumming them off people. So it's like, I was like, all right, I'm done. I just...
It's true. So, I mean, the government, I guess, did something right by jacking up the taxes on tobacco. Yeah.
Well, the next story, The Perfect Costume, was about a young girl that was the daughter of a single mother and the niece of a doting aunt. And at the core of the story is a deep desire for love and belonging, yet the violent act at the end of the story feels very abrupt. What was Lizzie responding to that she had inwardly repressed?
So I wrote that story quite some time ago. So My sister is a recovering addict, and she she has a daughter, and her daughter was very young. She was about 7, and for a short time, my sister just could not take care of her, and so she came to live with me for a little while, and which is what sort of inspired me to write the story, and not because my niece is in any way evil or has any sort of, pathological, violent tendencies or anything like that. She's the sweetest thing on the face of the earth.
Uh,
But I guess a part of me was very angry at my sister. And I think this was my way of sort of expressing that anger and that frustration, because the sister in the story, who's very unlike my sister in real life, but she's very self-centered, despite the fact that she does raise this child, and she doesn't neglect her at all, but she puts her own needs first. And I think that I wanted Lizzie, the child, to be aware of that on some level, and then understand that this other character had her best interest in mind, and maybe, but sort of misplaced that and sort of took it to an extreme. And part of it was just sort of anger at the mother character. It was just anger at this, she'd been giving this gift of this amazing kid, this precocious kind of, she wants to read, she wants to go to museums, she's just an interesting little child. And she is wasting her time with her, by being more interested in sort of who she's dating, and checking her phone instead of actually watching her child sort of discover things in the aquarium and so on. But on the other hand, there's also, when I think about the story again, I think the main character, she starts off by saying, being an aunt is like mommy light, right? It's not the full responsibility of motherhood. You can kind of shove all of this candy and fast food and into their mouths and then send them back home, and you don't have to deal with the repercussions. And that is true as well. And so it's very short-sighted to sort of say, put the mother in this, bad camp, and then the aunt is in, this sort of angelic camp, because that's not the case. But the child doesn't see it, the child at that age. And I even, talk about how, at that age, everything is amazing, right? To children at age 7 and 8, they look at everything with these wide eyes, and they take everything in, but they don't see, the forest for the trees. And so that's the ending sort of ensues. And but it's something that Lizzie's been thinking about for some time. And so I guess I just wanted, I don't know. I don't know what I was saying, Vince. I have to say, I talked around this question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what was going on in Lizzie's mind, except maybe just not understanding what being a mommy really is. That it's not just sort of fun times.
Gotcha. Well, let me take a quick second to say hello and welcome to our YouTube and Twitch viewers. Get a lot of people watching on Twitch. It's pretty cool. It's primarily for gaming, but getting a lot of viewers from there. So welcome, everybody. Well, so moving on to your next story, Extinguishing Fireflies. This story is about a woman named Leah, her daughter Ariel, and their cat Malishka. And I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Is that correct?
Yep. Okay. Malishka, yeah.
The name Malishka is a term of endearment that means beloved little one, and its origin is Slavic/Eastern European. Was this story based on any Slavic or Eastern European legend or mythology? And if so, could you tell us about it?
No, It is not,
okay.
but my. But,
I thought you were saying no, you couldn't tell me about it. I was
no,
like, all right,
Vince,
well,
no,
moving on.
No, it's not based on anything except. So my cousin was had to move to Russia for 4 years. Her husband had a job there. And when they were first relocated, she didn't speak a word of Russian. And so she had to sort of learn it very quickly. And she actually became pregnant there, gave birth there to their son. And when she came home, I said, oh, I want to write this story about this little girl. And I also need a term for what you would call a little girl, like a term of endearment in Russian. And she said, oh, yeah, it's Malishka. And I said, okay, that's what I'm going to use. So that's how I ended up there because of the ending of the story. And no, the origin of this story is actually, this is one of them that did not come from a nightmare. It was a book that I was writing when I used to work as a ghostwriter. There was a client who had hired me to write a piece and then had backed out. But she had told me about this story of her growing up and how she and a friend used to walk by, and it was like the 1950s, and they would walk by this one house, and her parents would say to her, don't go on their driveway. They're the communists. And so, but she was so little, she thought, oh my God, is that some sort of weird monster? like don't touch the communist lawn. You might catch the communism. And I remember her telling me this story, and I thought, what a really neat kind of concept. And then it just stuck with me. And I thought, when I was writing this story about these kids walking down and sort of, don't touch this neighbor's lawn, because even thinking about growing up, I'm sure we've all had, growing up, we had like the creepy neighbor's, house, or like the neighbor that you don't want to mess with their house or whatever it is. And I remember having one of those in my neighborhood, and, all of us daring the other one to go up the driveway or to touch the, whatever it was, the doorknob. And so I kind of pieced the two together and I thought, well, what could I make this house be? But it's more of a red herring of where the real monsters are. That story is really kind of an ode to the girls that were on my street growing up when I was little. A lot of them in the story are actually named after the girls that were on my street, like Kelly and Lisa. And so that was sort of my ode to this sort of innocence and of being a kid. And yeah, I wish I had a nicer like sort of origin story for that, but no, that I don't want to say too much without revealing sort of what goes on in the story, but yeah.
And let me ask you this, and pass if it's going to reveal any sort of a spoiler. Is there a supernatural element or no?
There is. Yeah, for sure.
I was trying to suss out whether it was supernatural or psychological.
No, there's a like transformation going on, and there's definitely a monster that's living in that neighborhood. It's just not the monster they think it is, or the kids think it is. So, yeah.
Well, I won't say any more. Listeners at home, you got to read the story, know what we're talking about. Well, so your next story, very, very catchy title, Tom Morello is in the back seat. References the famous guitarist from the band Rage Against the Machine, Tom Morello. And as we spoke about earlier, you also referenced Nine Inch Nails, who along with Rage Against the Machine were in their heyday in the 90s. So are you, like me, a member of Generation X? And if so,
I am.
how?
Yeah.
And if so, how does, that's all right. How does the angst of our generation inform your writing?
Oh my gosh, it's all over my writing. Yeah, no, I'm smack in the middle of Generation X. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, I'm like 1980. I might be like a millennial. Like, no, you're not. You're not. You're like 1980. You are Generation X. That's it. Just accept it. We're in middle age now. Like, let's just embrace it. No, I'm very proud of our generation. I think that I'm going to throw a little trivia in there. Probably everyone that's on Twitch is going to turn us off now, but they found, so as the generations have gone on from like the greatest generation and baby boomers and so on and so forth, they've literacy rates went up, right, as each generation sort of advanced, as well as IQ rates. And it actually reached its zenith with Generation X and then began to plummet immediately after us. So the millennials, Gen Z, the alphas, their literacy rates have gone way down, as have their IQ rates. And I'm thinking it's technology. It's technology. I mean, you and I grew up with, I mean, at least I can say I had 4 channels, on my television until we got cable.
I can't believe that I was alive during a time when there was no internet. I mean, there was internet, but it wasn't being utilized by the average,
right.
Joe.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Just the fact that there was a time when we couldn't just sort of press pause on the television or just find the show we wanted on streaming. Like, I don't have cable anymore. I just have streaming. And so it's very foreign to me, kind of thinking now to, if there's something that's on television at a certain time, if we weren't there, it was like, well, and we didn't have a VCR, like, tough, like, you missed it. That's it. Which is such a foreign concept today. But I don't think that's why we're the greatest. I feel like that's where it's sort of put upon, because we had to like stay up and map our television watching. I think what's unique to our generation is we're a group that we have grit. We didn't have to deal with the draft, but we dealt with the AIDS epidemic when it was at its deadliest, right? When we were coming of age. During our lifetime, women were able to get credit cards in their own name, right? Women's rights, they achieved so many milestones while we were alive, not in previous generations. But on the other hand, we also saw the skyrocketing of divorce rates and, poverty and drug use. And there are so many things that I think happened to our generation, but we sort of powered through it. I remember seeing during the pandemic, when everyone was isolated, all of these memes about like, millennials, freaking out that they're isolated, and Gen Z freaking out, and then Gen X, like, we got this. We're the latchkey generation. Like, we were alone for hours and hours and hours by ourselves as children. And I think that does inform a lot of my writing, a lot of the angst, a lot of the, I don't want to say that I'm jaded, because I'm not jaded about life. I think that life and the world is wonderful, really, at its core. But I think that I've lived long enough on this earth now to know that there are some realities that maybe are a little darker. And that comes through in my writing, I think. I don't think everyone is good in their core. I think there are some people that are not. And some of them appear in my stories. I think that people are much more flawed than we want to admit. But I do think that people can change. And so I think all of those things are in my stories. There are definitely some tropes that I think show up over and over and over again and one of the things is I throw in Gen X, touchstones throughout my writing. I've always done that. There is a voice in the back of my head that says, like, you're putting like a time clock on this story, because in a couple of years, no one's going to recognize this reference. But I guess I'm okay with that, because if I feel like it works, then it works. And but as far as the Tom Morello, I really wanted to work Tom Morello into a story. So it's very similar to the Trent Reznor thing. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. This was just my way of slipping in Tom Morello because he's amazing.
Yeah. Well, your story, New and Perfect, is my favorite out of the collection because it absolutely destroyed me. I was seated in my recliner when I was reading it, and when I reached the last lines, I just threw my head back and groaned, just like, oh God, Jesus, like, man, what a gut shot. So, sometimes I wonder if I'm a masochist, but, honestly, I think the underlying concept is that I am impressed with people that have the talent to elicit such a visceral and emotional response just by writing words on a page. So the story begins with a very real and traumatic event, but then takes a metaphorical turn. Metaphor and allegory can sometimes communicate what direct storytelling cannot. So, what led you to choose this symbolic approach to such a sensitive topic, and what aspects of trauma did it address that might otherwise be hard to express?
Yeah. I will tell, I'm not a big fan of trigger warnings, but I will tell readers, it's a sexual assault that happens, and be prepared for that, but also know that it's sexual assault. I think that I was trying to actually think the other day how many times I've dealt with it in fiction, and I think it may have been only 3 times total. It's not something I ever write about. It's not something I ever want to read about. And so I just don't usually include it. But it ended up in this story. So this story, the genesis of it is, the nightmare was the scene in the story where she is walking out of her apartment and there's an ice storm that has just ended, and sort of everything is covered in ice, and she's walking down the sidewalk and she sees like a fire hydrant covered in ice. It's sort of cracking in different parts, and she has to watch where she's walking. And I can remember from the dream and writing this down that, so I'm in this woman's head as I'm walking in the dream, and it's just this chunk that I'm leaving this strange apartment that I never lived in real life, but something very awful has happened there, and I'm going to some place that I feel like is going to help me, but there's a voice in the back of my mind that tells me that no, it's actually going to be something that's much, much worse than what I've left. And I wrote these things all down, and I put it aside. And this was actually something that I held on to for years. And it was in the sort of the bottom of my notepad. And a call came out for political horror. And I thought, oh gosh, what do I want to say about political horror? And it was also the beginning of the Me Too movement. And I didn't want to be preachy. I didn't want it to be like men are bad, because men aren't bad, right? Certain men are bad. Certain women are bad. Certain people are bad. So I didn't want it to be this man-hating piece, but I also saw some of the reaction that was going on to this movement, this Time's Up movement, of this backlash of it seemed like the misogyny just sort of went into overdrive on social media, almost to like overcompensate for the strides in feminism that were happening. And it just sort of came together because I thought, what if this were a Twilight Zone episode? Like how would this be structured? And when I sat down to write this, I imagined the story in black and white to this day, when even though I think I make her jacket navy or something like blue in the story, there are colors in the story, but I do remember writing it and imagining it in black and white and really focusing on the tactile nature of everything, like how the velvet upholstery of the car feels, or sort of the softness of a sweater, and because I wanted it to be very much about this woman who thinks she's in this world, and it really turns, and these women who think they're in this particular world, and it turns out it's something so nefarious and misogynistic that and it's funny because it's the one story that I get real visceral reactions from readers about. There are women that come up to me at conventions really aggressively. There was a woman that came up to me at one convention and said, "Listen, I need to talk to you about New and Perfect and what is going on with that ending, because I don't know what's going on, what you're thinking here." And I thought, oh my God, what do you think I'm saying? Like, do you think I'm being serious?
Like agreeing with the concept, like
right? And I
yeah.
thought that it was pretty clear that I was being very not tongue in cheek, because it's much more serious than that, but sort of pointing out the flaws by using this hyperbole. And I said, no, I need you to hear sort of, what I was going for. And she went, well, I was very upset by the ending, and I thought, oh God, this is actually not what I wanted to. I didn't want people to be, especially someone that is a survivor of sexual assault, to read it and go, oh my God, like, and a woman thinks this too, But on the other hand, people that have visceral reactions, like you're telling me you had, that makes me feel really good, because this is one of my favorite stories, as dark and horrible and awful as it is, because it achieves what I want my writing to achieve. And that is, I want it to be like a Twilight Zone. It's some of my favorite writing comes from the classic Twilight Zone. I love that it points out the flaws of humanity. I love that it turns humanity on its head. I love its ability to build twists that you don't see coming. And so that's what I always strive to do with my writing. I try to make it critical of the world, but also take the reader by surprise. And so it makes me happy that you were freaked out by the ending and taken by surprise, because that's what I wanted to do. So thank you for telling me that.
Yeah. So the woman that you said came at you aggressively, did she mention that she was a victim of sexual assault?
No,
okay.
But I mean, the fact that she was so upset. I mean, it was pretty obvious. And 1 out of 4 women are survivors of sexual assault. It's probably more than that. I mean, especially she was about my age, by this age. It's just, I mean, I hate to be pessimistic, but it's more than likely true that she, experienced this, or at least has someone that she's very close to who is. So no, did she ever say like, this has happened to me? No. But she was very upset. She was very upset by the story. But yeah, it's more of my, I guess it's my commentary on how some men do think of women, and not all and not most. So, but some.
Yeah, it's like when you use hyperbole to make a point. In this case, you're kind of using a, I don't know, what would it be? An analogy, I suppose, of a business transaction to show like how cheaply the woman is treated that's been in that situation.
Right. And the objectification sort of women, literally, in this story. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yours. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you done?
Yeah, no.
Or were you not done?
No. I just feel like now I feel like that's a downer. We need to talk about something happier. Is there a happier story that I've written?
Let's see here. I am going to go here and just to kind of lighten up the mood here. Here we go. Everybody, just take that in. We'll look at kittens for a minute.
Come on.
Oh, come on. You're kidding me, right? There we go. Okay.
Palate cleanser. Yes.
Yeah. All right. That is how much I care about my listeners.
I like it.
All right.
I like it.
So your story entitled White Trash was a great example of the dread produced by a horrendous crime committed amongst a group of adolescent friends. And one of the most compelling aspects of the story is the difference in levels of, I don't know if consciousness would be the right word, but like the level of maturity, the myelination among the characters, because some are more adult-like and prone to violence, while others cling to their childlike innocence. And this kind of reminded me of that movie. It had River Phoenix in it. Oh, God. It'll come to me probably by the end of the question. But how did you develop these contrasting, the River's Edge? That's what it was.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. How did you develop these contrasting mindsets, and what do they symbolize within the context of the crime?
I'm flattered that you noticed that as I think, I work with teenagers by day. So my day job, I teach in a city high school. I teach mostly seniors. And so I have kids that are 17, 18, 19 years old, and I love it. I absolutely love working with that age group, which people usually make a weird face when I say that, but it's true. I don't give me the little ones. Don't give me like the sticky kids. I don't want like an 8-year-old. I don't want like a whole class of 8-year-olds.
You don't want to get some hybrid form of the flu?
No. Although my kids do sneeze on me often, but it's fine. I really like working with teenagers. I've told them, I'm very honest with them from day one. I say, every day one of you is going to ruin my day. You're going to say something that's mean, or you're going to like take out your own like angst on me. But I really love coming to work and working with you. And it's the truth. I really do like them. And I like working with teenagers because of that. I think they're in that kind of nowhere zone between being children and being adults, because they are, even though we call them young adults, they're not adults. There are a lot of things that they can rationalize and think about as adults, but they're still teenagers. They're still adolescents. So they still have that brain going on. And I've seen at times like they'll be, goofy kids. And there are other times when they are dead serious adults, and they do make decisions and say things that are very mature and things that I would expect to come out of someone that's in college or in their 20s. And so, but I think that that's really the cool part about a teenager, is that they are sort of this range. And so writing these characters in White Trash really came very naturally to me, because I can see the spectrum every day. I have the girls that are, constantly looking at themselves in their phone and sort of like fixing their hair. And
influencers.
Right. And I have the boys that are very, tunnel vision and don't sort of see that what they're accusing other people of is exactly what they are. I rarely have mean kids. I do have to say that I rarely have a mean kid. In fact, I can say, knock on wood, even though the school year's just begun, I don't have one this year. But in the past, I've had, there've been one or two where I've thought, God, like this kid, if something doesn't change, he's going to hurt someone. or she's going to hurt someone very badly. And that scares me because there are people in this world that are like that. They're few and far between, but in white trash, the kids. There is one kid that is extraordinarily mean, and I think part of where that comes from is his own insecurity, which is what usually happens with teenagers if they're mean, if they bully others. It's because they're insecure. They have their own shit going on at home, and this is where they're going to drop it, right, and have someone else carry it for them. And I think that's what's going on with this guy, but he crosses the line into complete sociopathy. And and there's also this aspect of the teenagers who they don't want to be the person to speak out. Um, Even if you don't have this one person that's sort of terrorizing you, if you're in a group, there is that mentality, I think, when you're an adolescent, to be afraid to be the one person to say, no, this is wrong, or no, we're not going to do this, or we're going to stop this now. And none of them do that. They're all complicit in what happens. And it just happens that the main character, who I think I really, even looking back now, I think that I make her a little too sympathetic. I think that I don't feel bad about what happens to her in the end, because I think that she is as guilty as the other ones. And maybe she might be the only one that is recognizing it. It's on the surface. Um, but I don't think that makes her any less guilty. And so I wanted her to be identifiable. I wanted us to be on her side, but also feel that guilt and maybe not like her a little bit by the end. But the fact that some of them just don't seem to feel guilt over anything, except they always seem to be worried about being caught. And not what they did. That's the problem, more than anything.
Yeah. Well, your story, Doramat, which I assume is a play on words because her name was Dora Matthews, but she was treated like a doormat,
yes,
is about a woman who worked, cleaned house, and had dinner on the table every night when her husband came home, yet her husband grew bored with her and started cheating. And Dora observes the cheating for quite some time before taking any action. What was behind her voyeuristic behavior? She wasn't watching them have sex, and in fact, it seemed like what she was doing would be pretty boring.
Yeah. So originally, I wanted her to, lie in wait, see what was going on, and then maybe the next time, go in and confront him or whatever. But I thought, well, that's what most people would do. But I want her to be unusual. I think most of the people in my stories don't act the way I would act, I would hope, or most people I know would act in situations. I imagined her sitting out there week after week. I think I even say that she becomes like this Ted Kaczynski like figure because she dresses with the hoodie and like the glasses and everything. Just sitting behind the bush and watching and waiting and watching and waiting. And I think that there is a very special degree of coldness to revenge that you have the patience to wait and enact. A part of me wants to say that she was waiting for, the girl to show up at one point and her husband to say, like, it's over. And then she could go back and, to their regular sort of diorama, right? The tableau that she's created of a marriage. But I don't think so. I think Dora had this sort of, maybe part of the pleasure. It was almost like she was savoring what she was going to do. And And it was all about, and their life was all about routine, right? So, and even his affair becomes this routine. It's always when she's going to work at this certain time, that he brings the wife, and that's what I think makes it all the more upsetting. Is the fact that he's bringing this woman into their home. It's not
Yeah.
even like he's going off someplace else. She's watching this, you know, this home that she's created, him do this, and so he ends up being caught by his own routine in the end. You know, he always comes home, he fixes himself a martini, and this, you know, and so she's going to, you know, fix the final sort of meal for him in the end. Do I want Dora to be a friend of mine? No, no. She's obviously, she obviously has some, you know, there's some ethical issues there. But I get it. Like, I get it as a woman. I, I think a lot of my female characters have this one thing in common, and besides the drinking, which is also something that a lot of my characters have, but the audiobook narrator of this book, when she was recording it, she and I have become friends, and we were actually out. We met in New York City, and we were walking about the city, and she said, and she was preparing to sort of narrate it, and she's a classically trained actor. So she's been an actor her entire life. And so that's how she goes about approaching each of her books, is just by inhabiting these characters. And so she had a lot of questions about motivation and so forth. And she said, well, one of the first things she said was, do you have a drinking problem? I said, what? And she said, you know, a lot of your characters have some like severe drinking issues in your book. And I said, oh yeah, what else? And she sort of listed all of these other tropes that she was noticing. And I mean, one is, I have women in their 30s and 40s having their own sort of midlife crises. And whether it's a, oh my God, this is my life, and this is what my husband's doing now, or if it's this is my life, and you know, my neighbor is doing this, and I'm having blackouts, and so on and so forth, or whatever it is, these women are all having these crises of some sort, and they're all about my age at the time of writing the story. And so I have to sort of look at it and say, oh my God, like, what am I saying about myself here? And certainly, please know that I would never kill a spouse. And
yes, of course not.
I'm just letting
people
everyone
listening.
know that.
A wink, wink. Know what I mean?
Right. You can all trust my martinis. It's fine. But I guess a part of me, I get it. I get being in your 40s and investing all of this time into a certain life, right? Or thinking that this is where your life is going, and then having, I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to have the rug pulled out from under me and realize, oh my God, this isn't what I thought it was at all. And sort of how I would deal with it would not be how Dora does, but I would certainly have some issues with it. And so Dora just takes it to an extreme. Yeah.
Indeed. And what is that extreme? Listeners at home, you have to read.
Yeah.
Well, so your story entitled Neighborhood Watch was another excellently obfuscated narrative that had a shocking ending. It's centered around a middle-aged woman named Tracy that lives by herself in a suburban neighborhood and has watched a lot of new neighbors move in, but becomes transfixed on a new family that moves in across the street. She believes that the husband, a man named Kurt, is abusive and becomes very suspicious when she starts to notice that the wife, a woman named Janice, no longer seems to be present. So there's a strong sense of isolation in the protagonist's life, which seems to fuel her obsession with the family across the street. So when it came to Tracy, was loneliness and paranoia the prime mover for her? And could you kind of tell us a little bit about her psychology?
Yeah, I think so. I think that story came from, it was a nightmare that I had actually about that basement. My basement, so I live in the Northeast, so I have a basement, and I know that people who live in the South don't have a basement necessarily, but
Not that you know of.
right, yeah, or a crawl space. But I have a basement, and it has, and up here we have, like full floor. Some people actually have finished basements. So I just have like a regular cellar, my washer and dryers down there, and so forth. But in my nightmare, it was my cellar, but the floor was all dirt. And I think that came from just in the back of my mind from years, decades back when I was first shopping for a house. I remember looking at a house that had, when I went into everything was beautiful. And then you went down into the basement, it was just a dirt floor. And I remember thinking at the time, oh my God, it'd be so easy to just hide a body down here because there it is. You just dig up the floor. And so that came into a nightmare, and I had written it down, and sort of this concept of walking around the basement with a sharp object and feeling that dirt underneath my feet. And it was a summer, I remember, when I wrote this story, and there was someone moving in a house sort of diagonally across the street from me. I don't know who they are. I've never met them. I didn't watch them. I have no idea if they have kids. I don't even know if he has a wife or if she disappeared. Who knows? I have no idea. But yeah. I just remember them moving in, and it just happened to be a summer where I didn't really have any responsibilities. Usually I'll have like an anthology that I'm doing, but it was one of these summers I wasn't teaching summer school. I wasn't traveling. I had nothing to do. And so I ended up, there was like a good 2 or 3 weeks where I was just sort of getting up late. I discovered Portuguese wine, which is Vinho Verde. It's in the story. It's delicious. And I can remember like having just lunch, sitting in my living room, watching the movers and, drinking a glass of wine and thinking to myself, good God, like I could go off the edge here. Like this is the first step in, having some sort of weird addiction or even agoraphobia, because I just spent week after week after week just sort of getting up and just, loafing around the house. And a Twilight Zone marathon was on one day, and I ended up watching those back to back. And so that sort of works into the story as well. But it did start to occur to me, like, what would happen? Being a teacher and having summers off. And what if, no one was checking in on me? What if I didn't see anyone for months and months? And what if it started to, I started to, have some sort of breakdown? Like, is there anyone here to check it? No. And I sort of wanted to explore that phenomenon and sort of what does happen if someone is really has had a complete breakdown, but no one really sees it. So she's been put on leave from her job in the story, and it's hinted that it was some sort of altercation between her and a coworker that she just finds irritating. It's not that the coworker has done anything in particular, but then it sort of is resolved in the end when you sort of figure out it's much more serious than it appeared. And so, yeah, I wanted her to appear to be our heroine, her to be our person with a broken leg and rear window, watching everything. But really perhaps not being the reliable narrator that we want her to be.
Gotcha. Well, your story, The Found Boys, I assume is a play on the title The Lost Boys.
It is.
Speaking of Generation X. Yeah. And expands on the concept of a roving band of homeless vampires. But unlike the vampires in the film The Lost Boys, who revel in their powers, the vampires in your story seem more grounded in a sense of realism. So, what inspired you to take a more stripped down approach to traditional vampire lore, focusing on their survival and age, as well as their nomadic existence?
Yeah, I used to be a big true crime fan. Every once in a while, I'll read up on something, but I used to be a big true crime fan. And so the fact that there have been these very prolific serial killers who have never been caught or identified always fascinated me because I think to myself, like, what happened? Did they, is it like the Zodiac killer? Did he just like slip in his bathtub one day and hit his head and he died? And then we're like, whatever happened to Zodiac? And oh, he must have just stopped, or maybe he's in jail, but maybe it's just like something very, you know, everyday like that. But what has happened to these serial killers? So I took serial killers from history who have never been caught, Jack the Ripper, the Zodiac, the Alphabet Killer, um, and I tried to reimagine that no, they weren't ever caught, but instead they found a way to live forever. And that's why they were killing people in the first place. It was sort of a way of getting their souls so that they could, feed their own life force. And I threw in a real witch from the Springfield, Massachusetts area. Her name is Mary Parsons. She's actually a real witch a real accused witch from the Salem witch hysteria time period, who is in the area where this takes place. And I just wanted to explore this concept of there are certain legends of real people that continue on, and what does that mean? Like how does that happen? And I wanted them to actually facilitate their own continuation, and by doing what they're doing, they continue to live on. Yeah, and so each one of the characters is actually named after a Peter Pan character. So there's Michael and John that stumble across um, all of these people on the side of the river, and each one of them is given a nickname from Peter Pan's The Lost Boys.
Gotcha. Yeah, does this bring up any nostalgia for you?
It does. It does. I was a huge Lost Boys fan.
I remember seeing this poster in this old theater. It was in a small town that was close to where we lived. We always used to drive to that theater. I wish I had this poster, actually. This would be so nice to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Jason Patrick does a lot of horror conventions still.
Oh, really?
And I believe some of not Kiefer Sutherland, but the other Lost Boys were sort of on tour with him, and they were appearing in a few of the horror cons. It's phenomenal. Yeah.
Yep. Well, your story, The Thickening, was about a real condition, but also seemed metaphorical. It focused on an Alzheimer's-like disease that suddenly appears and coincides with extreme levels of one's own social media promotion. And there's mention of religious and spiritual traditions that avoid being photographed, as it's believed to create a graven image of oneself and steal one's soul, which that is a real thing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So is this story a commentary on narcissism? And can you kind of expand on the underlying message?
100%. It is 100%. Hey, Mike.
All of the influencers are doomed. You're all going to die.
It is my screaming commentary on the narcissism that goes on social media. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like social media in the sense that I like the fact that I can keep up with friends that I would never see otherwise. I mean, there are people, one of my closest friends in the writing business actually lives in the UK. And I would, even though we text just about every day, I get to see, things he posts, aspects. I get to see visuals that I wouldn't see otherwise. And People that I I can only keep in contact, so much. I can still keep up with their lives, and I really like that. However, if I could do that without being on social media, I would never go on it. I don't have a Twitter account. I don't have an X account. I have a Facebook account. I rarely check it, much to the chagrin of a lot of publishers where I'm in anthologies and they create groups and they're like, you have to check this page. And I'm like, I'm not on Facebook. Like I have to, like, I don't have the app or anything like that. I'm like real old school where I have to like type in facebook.com and like log in that way.
Uh-huh.
I have an Instagram. And I got to tell you, primarily because it is easy to check because it's visual. I don't have to read anyone's manifesto. And
Manifesto.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
But and it was really, I had to push myself to open up that Instagram account. And I remember the first time, even putting my own image on there, like, oh God, this is such navel gazing. Like, I can't, this is so like, look at me, everyone look at me. And it is like, I will completely admit that I'm just as guilty of it, every time I post a picture. But I'll tell you, it's the weirdest thing. The algorithm, I find that if I'm in the picture or someone else is in the picture, if there's a face somewhere in the post, it gets more views and more likes than if it's just sort of an image of a like, something that's not human. And I don't know what that is. I don't know what people are responding to, but it's very thinly veiled, but obviously it's like the Kardashians and these people who are famous for being famous is horrific to me. It's horrific. It's also really difficult to teach teenagers. No, like you can't just make, $1 million being an influencer. Like it's an unusual thing to be able to do that. There was one student who I had a couple of years ago who she was so smart. I think she graduated like fifth or sixth in the class. And I said, where are you going next year for college? She's like, oh, I'm not going to college. And I said, oh, what are you going to do? And she's like, I'm going to make YouTube videos. And I said, wait, what? And of course, now I'm thinking like, oh God, like, what kind of videos are you making?
Is this traumatizing?
No. Oh my God. Oh God. Just, yes, please.
But I'll take it down. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I don't, God, I sound so old when I say things like this, but I'm like, I just don't get it. I don't get it. All of a sudden, this society's become all about it's me, look at me, me, and not about real connections. And I think that's what I wanted to do with the thickening and sort of this idea of what is it stealing from you every time you invest all of this time into how you're looking on social media rather than actual interpersonal connections with people. And yeah.
And I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about a girl that was saying she wanted to make YouTube videos.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's actually what she's doing. So she's making travel videos. So she and her family travel a lot. They go on cruises. And then so and she's a fantastic video editor. Don't get me wrong. Like she did projects in my class that were phenomenal. But she makes sort of like she has her own YouTube channel and she has followers. And I guess I'm assuming you sell advertising. I don't know how it works. I'm such a newbie to this kind of stuff. There's this whole meme I remember seeing about, it was a friend of mine that posted it. Ironically, now I'm talking about something on social media, but it was about how, how someone deals with a breakup and how it has to be on camera and then they have to be like very upset, and then post and then they're fine about it. And how, the emotions are only real if the camera's running. And that whole concept, if I could be Bentley Little, right? So Bentley Little is still selling like hotcakes, and he has not put one toe in social media. Like all of the other big horror writers, right? King, all of them, they're all posting constantly, whether it's on X or it's Facebook or Threads, whatever it is. Bentley Little has never had a social media account, and yet he rocks it. And I would love to, I'd love to be in that space where I could just write and not worry about, and if I want to use social media, it's just for to see how my friends are doing. And that's it. And not make it about, okay, everyone now look at me, look at me, look at my book, look at my product, look at this. So
Mm.
that's what the thickening is really about. It's how I do feel like it's stealing a little bit of all of us.
Well, talking about your stories is by no means exhaustive. I've skipped around quite a few of them, but your final of the collection, the coup de grace, as it were, Haunt, was really interesting and seemed to center around a man and his struggle to find his muse. It appeared that he would use alcohol to find his muse, but when he overindulged, it destroyed his ability to create. So, was this based on any personal or indirect experience? I think I asked Ronald Malfi, and he was like, I kind of subscribe to the write drunk, edit sober.
Yeah. Oh, Malfi's my favorite drinking partner. Yeah, it's absolutely. It's I do not write while I'm drinking. I've come up with some bananas ideas when I've been drinking, where I've written them down. I'm like, this is the best idea ever. And then I'll, revisit it, the next day. I'm like, what the hell am I thinking? Jesus Christ. And I have to tell you, I've been traveling a lot this year and going to different conventions and events. And I have found, for the most part, that every horror writer that I know is either a teetotaler, right? Absolutely does not drink a drop. And it could be because of alcoholism in their family. It could be of a recovering alcoholic. It could be like one of my friends actually had a back injury and she's taking some medication for that. And so she doesn't drink at all because of how it would mix with the medication. Or they're drinkers. Coming as a teacher, teachers are big drinkers too. No way. Writers drink teachers under the table every time. And I'm not sure why that is. I guess I would just hazard a guess that it's that, and I don't know if this is so like a narcissistic thought, but I think that we as writers, we are always sort of inhabiting emotions, right? We have to sort of be able to get into an emotion and really kind of run around in it and feel it and get every nook and cranny of it and ride that wave of the emotion to be able to convey it in a believable way to our readers. And when we're not riding that high, we either need something that's going to maybe bring us back down to earth. The really manic writers that I know, maybe that's what they're drinking for, or they're riding the high of the alcohol. I know that I consider myself a happy drunk. I'm not a maudlin or I'm not going to go out and punch you that I can recall. So, but I'm also not I'm not a Dorothy Parker. You're not going to find me, underneath a table somewhere. I'm certainly, there have been times where I've maybe imbibed a little bit too much, but it's not something that I do on a regular basis. But I am a drinker. I am a fan of cocktails, and I do think it goes hand in hand with being a writer or being a musician or being someone that creates things, because it's sort of a way gosh, I don't know. Like I said, either tempering, maybe the emotions that you're riding, or trying to revisit that high again. Um, I do look at women writers in the past that I look up to, like Dorothy Parker, like Elizabeth Bishop, like Patricia Highsmith, and I've read about the problems that they've experienced with their excessive drinking, and it is something that is always in the back of my mind, especially having addiction in my family. But Haunt, I wrote in one sitting the description of being hungover and it feeling like you have a helmet that's on your head that's two sizes too small. I am fully in touch with that emotion. Like, I understand what that feels like. I know that experience, but I'm not someone that writes while I'm drinking. Um, I think it slows my words down. I think it for me, I need to hear the words, and alcohol would, I think, slow those down for me. Um, I'll write all day, and then I will go and sit on my couch, and I will have many vodka sodas, but I won't do it while I'm sitting down at the computer. And but it does go hand in hand. And yeah, Haunt was a really personal. It was a really personal story for me. I was going through a period of writer's block, and it lasted for months and months. And it, for a writer to not be able to do something that you love so much and that usually comes naturally to you, it's just so frustrating. It made me feel like a failure, is what it really made me feel like. And so I tried to sort of jump into this character, this Michael character, and walk around in his shoes and sort of imagine what it was. What is it? Sort of personify this frustration of not being able to reach that muse anymore and chasing the muse. And then what happens when you don't respect it and don't appreciate it, I guess.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, it is a great collection. Listeners at home, buy it, read it, and review it. And let me say thank you for taking the time out of your busy touring schedule to do this, because I'm not sure where you're at in it right now, but we can bring up your list here. Let's see, where are we at?
Yay.
We're in September, so that's October. Okay, so September.
Right. So Connecticut Horror Fest.
Connecticut Horror Fest.
I will be there on Saturday with the HWA Connecticut chapter. So my brethren from the HWA, my chapter, will also be there with me. So please come by. It's not just my stuff that you have to kind of like not make eye contact with me and not buy. Please come, because there are all sorts of really cool things. It's not on there, and I need to actually put it on there. I'm going to be at Barnes and Noble in Enfield the following Friday. But then please, if you are in the Midwest, come to AuthorCon. This is such an amazing event. I have the distinction of being one of the guests of honor there this year at St. Louis, but I really just want you to go because it is a fantastic charity. All of the money that's raised goes to burn victims and survivors of breast cancer. It is such a phenomenal charity. So please, if you're in that area, please come.
All right. And I mean, just kind of running through here, it looks like you're busy till June of 2025. So take a break at some point.
It slows down a little bit the middle of November. So I get to, actually spend time, friends and family. for the
Gotcha.
holidays. So, but please, yeah, if you're around, you visit my website and please come and say hello. Say hello.
Absolutely. Well,
Oh, can I talk about writers that are up and coming that I have read
sure.
recently? Do you mind? Okay.
Absolutely.
So there have been a couple of writers that I've read recently that are not necessarily new. They've been writing for a few years, but maybe they're not getting the attention that they should be getting. And there are a few. So there's a book that's coming out in December called Red Hill by C. Jones. It is probably one of the best folk horror books I have read in years and years and years. I could not put it down. I was really fortunate that I was given it ahead of time to blurb, and I absolutely loved it. Elle Stevenson is coming out with a book at the end of this month. I want to say it's called The Boy at Number 9 Whitlock, and it's a queer occult horror book that's coming out. It hit number 1 on pre-orders already for queer horror. And gosh, who else? Ray Wild. Her collection, I Do Not Apologize for My Position on Men, is a short fiction collection. Fantastic horror, all different types of horror. And Andrew Adams, who I know you've had on this show.
Mm-hmm.
I am reading a book that's coming out by him right at the turn of the year. I want to say January. It's a serial killer book. I'm halfway through it. I love it already. He's fantastic. So many writers in the indie horror scene that are just really just absolutely kicking ass, and people need to check them out.
Sounds great. Well, Rebecca, it has been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me on and for exploring my problematic drinking.
I thought I was exploring the drinking of your characters. I didn't know it was going to get so real.
it's right here, Vince, right here. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, as we bring the show to a close, is there anything you'd like to plug or let your readers know about?
Oh, so I just had a short story in The Rack, which is edited by the fantastic Tom Deedy. It is all short fiction inspired by the Bananas paperbacks from hell from the 70s and 80s. So it's all these kind of 70s and 80s style horror stories. That just came out. I have some other short stories that are coming out that I'm completely blanking on that are on my website. And, but yeah, no, more than anything, I just really want to promote AuthorCon St. Louis. It's the first weekend in October, and it's such a great cause. And there are going to be so many horror writers there. It's just a fantastic gig and just great vibes. So if you're in that area, please come. Please come.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, listeners at home, as well as the live listeners, all links are in the description. And Rebecca, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who tuned in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can watch the episodes live. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a new episode featuring the best and brightest writers and filmmakers of dark literature and film. So until then, stay healthy, stay sane, and as always, thank you for listening. See you next time.